They're like my favorite podcast to listen to.
Get a sound check.
All right.
Yeah!
You have you laughing all over this thing.
Dude, I love them.
Here we go! It's the Tryforce.
Spider-Man does whatever a spider can. Can he swing from a web? I don't know, I didn't play the game. Look out, here comes Spider-Man.
I'm going to take a cue from you. This is the Spider-Man podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about Spider-Man 24/7 every week. Guys, hey, how you doing?
Hey, Zach, welcome back.
It's been quite a while and quite a pandemic since I've seen the both of you.
Hold on, wait, I got to give you something. Yes, Zach is back.
Thank you. I had to take some time off due to school stuff, and then there was a global super virus.
Yeah.
So,
you
guys were able to hold down the fort. You guys had the Animal Crossing episode, which I am very sad that I was not able to weigh in on. But I'm very glad it happened. And, it has not been an excellent week for me, so you guys let me choose the topic for today, and that is going to be Spider-Man 2018 from Insomniac Games.
We should have talked about this a long time ago, because it is a fucking masterpiece of a game.
It's a pretty...
beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful game.
I think it's a pretty great game. I think that there are things that very obviously are good. There are things that are reminiscent of other things, and there were things that I was like, as a Spider-Man fan, I was glad that they were included, and then as a Spider-Man fan, I was also like, what's really happening here? But that's a web for a different time, and I think that we can probably start off at the beginning. Spider-Man has had a pretty long history of having video games about him and pertaining to him, probably more in line with like the Spider-Man movies that came out. Like when Spider-Man 2 came out, there was a Spider-Man 2 video game. When Spider-Man 3 came out, there was a Spider-Man 3 video game, and there were some of them that were that were different and for different reasons. But I think that Spider-Man was of the mainstream superheroes, and I think he is likely the most mainstream Marvel superhero, got a video game adaptation that was good enough, so to speak. So there's plenty of terrible games about superheroes.
Yes.
So, obviously, 2018, Insomniac Games and Sony, which owned the rights to Spider-Man, still at this time. That was before what we call the Holland merger between Disney and Sony, which I do believe is also still up in the air. It concentrates on Peter Parker, as always, as Spider-Man, but this is a more, I would say, adept Peter Parker at being Spider-Man. He's been Spider-Man for 8 years at this time as the game opens up, so I would say he has been web-slinging for a good amount of time, and as such, he kind of already has like the previous exposure in New York City, and that's another thing that I think is really cool about this game, is that it is a scale model to a certain extent of New York City. So like there are different districts, and it's quite like another game which I'll be comparing it to multiple times throughout this podcast, but like it had like the financial district or Chinatown, and you could really move through these very different sections of New York City. And I know a lot of my friends that live in the city actually went and tried to find their neighborhoods and like the buildings that they live in and stuff. And some were able to find it, some were not. But I know I have some friends who live in Hamilton Heights, and there are occasions where you're swinging about, which we have to talk about the swinging system. It's amazing. It's really cool. But like I got a police call, from Hamilton Heights, and it was pretty cool to like actually be in New York City because Spider-Man is grounded in this actual real-world location.
He's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I love him.
Yeah, I know. So the story centers around Peter Parker, obviously, as I've said, and he, at the beginning of the game, he takes out Wilson Fisk, who is the Kingpin, a very famous Marvel super villain, just a very big
Cube-like man.
Cube man with he's very large, and he's a mob boss, and he's very rich, and he's very smart, all sorts of things. He was the main villain in the Into the Spider-Verse movie, which is a lot of people have been able to get to the Spider-Man universe nowadays through the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie. So a lot of people remember him from there, but the real there is kind of trouble in finding who is the main antagonist of this game. Rain, would you agree?
Yeah, because you think it's one person, and then they're like, "Oh wait, we're gonna do this now," and you're just like, "What? Huh?"
Yeah.
I have to be honest. I haven't beaten the game yet because I don't want to do the ending until I've 100%ed like everything else.
God, good for you. God bless you. That's awesome. I like that.
I got the game last year, so like I've just been really like every time I go back to it, I'm like, oh okay, what do I have to do today? Pigeons? Let's get all the pigeons.
Oh, the pigeons! Oh my God. Yeah, there is. You do help a homeless man find all of his pet pigeons, so that's a lot of fun.
That's what?
Yeah, no, it's really cute.
Colton, you had to be there.
I gotta be there. That sounds like
doing
fun.
The Spider-Man. I'm actually currently there, and I will be playing the game as we do through the podcast. So if certain things pop up to me, I might stop my point and talk about it. But basically, I would say for narrative reason, the main supervillain is this guy, Mr. Negative. And Mr. Negative kind of sounds like Colton when he's had a bad day, but it's really this guy who's able to kind of I think he's almost kind of like able to absorb negative feelings and then reduce and bring them out in waves of energy, or like use them to corrupt and control people.
Oh, dude, no wonder he lives in New York.
Yeah, I get it, and it's pretty crazy about New York is they have landmarks, and you actually have to go and take pictures of not only real New York City landmarks like the Empire State Building and City Hall and the New York Library, but also like Marvel locations, like within the Marvel universe, like Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum is a location. The Wakandan Embassy is a location. The bar that Luke Cage runs is a location. Jessica Jones' investigative place, Alias Investigations, is a location. So there's like a lot of not only real world mixing with the Marvel world. So Mr. Negative is definitely one of the main antagonists. And what I find is so interesting about the villains in this game is there are a lot of Spider-Man royalty in this game. There's a lot of enemies that are very commonly seen in the Spider-Man pages. You've got like Electro, and you've got a Scorpion, and all these characters that like we're very familiar with, and it's all very literate in certain degrees to like actual Marvel goings on, because J. Jonah Jameson, Colton, you'll love this actually. J. Jonah Jameson, notoriously not Spider-Man's biggest fan. He has an Alex Jonesian-esque podcast where he like talks about Spider-Man and how shit he is, and all this stuff. But yeah, at one point he's like, oh, something about Scorpion. Now, a lot of you may know that I did actually fund the experiment that gave Scorpion his powers, and I'm like, holy shit, like that was actually true. Like J. Jonah Jameson tried to create like an anti-Spider-Man and basically ended up creating Scorpion. So there's a lot of really cool villains in this. A lot of some of them are main. There's a whole Tombstone side mission, and I love Tombstone. He's one of my faves. But I think the real crux of the story is the relationship between Peter Parker and Otto Octavius, who if anybody's familiar with the Spider-Man universe, eventually becomes a very prominent villain in the form of Dr. Octopus. So I feel like I'm talking a lot. So Rain, do you want to kind of describe the situation between Peter and Otto Octavius for those that haven't played the game?
Yeah, so when you start up the game, Peter Parker is working with or under. It's been a hot minute.
Both, pretty much.
Yeah, so he's kind of working under him in this rundown lab where they're creating. It's like this technology that works through the nerves.
Yeah, it's kind of like artificial limbs that respond to the brain like your real arm would.
Yeah, and for a good chunk of that beginning, Dr. Octavius is very looking out for Peter. He's like, oh, you don't have to stay working with me. I can't pay you, and all of these things. And he's very caring. But, Peter Parker being Peter Parker, it's just what? I don't need money.
Yeah.
I'm here for you. And it's dude, your rent, my guy, your rent is so due.
Yeah. It's actually true that Peter Parker does get evicted from his apartment at one point in the game. So it's really giving you the New York experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so basically you kind of start off with this friendly relationship, and obviously, as, all comic book stories are like to do, there's tension, there's an eventual break, and then Otto Octavius becomes Dr. Octopus and becomes a villain. But there's really also a lot of political corruption because your boy, Norman Osborn, who is Peter Parker's best friend's dad in the form of Harry Osborn, is now mayor of New York City. So that's pretty something, and is really talking about a lot of the political corruption that's actually present in New York City, in the fact of having New York City's favorite capitalist as your mayor, as Norman Osborn. But the thing that connects all of these guys, Wilson Fisk, Mr. Negative, Norman Osborn, is real. Even Otto Octavius, to a degree, is this thing that they call Devil's Breath, and that's the main kind of comic booky issue that needs to be solved. Is that as we come to find out, there is a virus that they've developed. Norman Osborn has actually developed for a very specific reason, which we don't find out until the very, very end of the game. As this almost cure of all diseases, right? This kind of cure all stuff that will get rid of any sort of badness present in the body. But it also has a very high failure rate and a very high body count. And there's this whole sequence of them showing that if it goes wrong, it's going to go terribly wrong. So, typical stuff, typical Spider-Man stakes. But the main kind of way we get access to a lot of the villains is through this thing they have called the Raft, which is a hyper-security prison for a lot of the more super-powered Spider-Man villains. So as it starts off, Wilson Fisk gets arrested, he gets sent to the Raft, and then later on in the game, basically Mr. Negative breaks out a very specific set of 6 villains from the Spider-Man comics. Does anybody, for some brownie points in the chat, want to tell me what those 6 are?
Rhino's there.
Rhino is definitely there. Yes, that is one of them.
I want to say Electro?
Electro is definitely there.
Yes.
That's 2 of 6.
The Scorpion guys.
Scorpion, Matt Gargan, that boy, Scorpion. That's
Venom?
3. You guys, not Venom.
Is Venom in the game?
No, Venom is not there.
Yes and no. We'll talk about that later.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Think of the least effective Spider-Man villain.
The Goblin. The Green Goblin.
The Vulture.
The Vulture.
Wrong.
I couldn't remember his name. I was like, oh, the guy with the wings was so annoying.
Yeah, the Vulture. He's awful. And they literally make a joke about how useless he is. It's as soon as he's like, Spider-Man, we meet again, you just web him in the face and he's like, ah! So it's pretty good. It's pretty funny.
He's just like the
great?
useless Skeletor of the series, basically.
Yeah. So that's and there obviously, and then we also have Mr. Negative, obviously, who isn't in the original 6 in the comics. But then we also have, finally, after he does his whole villain turn, Otto Octavius as Dr. Octopus. So those are colloquially known in the Marvel Universe as the Sinister Six, and they're pretty much like the League of Extraordinary Villains of the Marvel, especially the Spider-Man universe. So I really like that they did that. There's pretty much boss fights for every single one of them. There's a boss fight with the Shocker, who's also another pretty fun Spider-Man villain who uses shockwaves. There's obviously Yuri Lowenthal is the voice of Spider-Man.
Spider-Marth. Spider-Marth. Sorry.
Spider-Marth. not Spider Sasuke.
No, all I can hear is like anytime he talks in the Spider-Man game, all I think is the opening sequence of Smash. We'll each need to take out about 10.
Oh God!
I'm glad that's what you think, because I think Spider Yosuke, but
Spider Yosuke.
Oh my God!
Nice.
But that's honestly one of the selling points for me getting this game, because Yuri Lowenthal is my favorite voice actor of all time.
Wow, that's huge.
All of my favorite voice actors have voiced Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Which, it's not like I like them because of that. Like, I liked them for other things, and then just as I went through, I was like, oh, they voiced Spider-Man? That's weird. What a coincidence.
Didn't you say Robbie Damon voice?
Robbie Damon voices Spider-Man.
Yeah, there was that Drake Bell Spider-Man for whatever reason.
Whatever reason they thought that was alright. But, we lived there.
Vulture. Just like...
Yeah, no, and so there's a lot of Yuri Lowenthal actually has a very funny line that I was just seeing earlier, which is like, it's like, okay, so I just had dinner with my ex-girlfriend. Oh, that's right, Mary Jane and Peter Parker are broken up in this universe, in this timeline. And they fucking let you remember it. Let me tell you, they tell you constantly that they're broken up, and it is annoying. And he goes, well, I just had dinner with my ex-girlfriend, and now I'm going to go fight a guy who uses shockwaves to murder people. What a perfectly normal life you have, Peter Parker. So Yuri Lowenthal crushed it. Like, he did an excellent Spider-Man. You can tell he really liked the role. He's obviously very vocal about how much he likes the role on his Instagram. And what became pretty much synonymous with the Yuri Lowenthal Spider-Man was the new suit that you get for this game that has like a white spider on it instead of the typical kind of red and blue black spider. But speaking of suits, you can get a whole lot of different unlockable Spider-Man suits throughout the game, and that is so many, outrageously many. I'll pause and tell you how many there are right now. But you can basically go around the world, and you can get different. You can definitely get different ones for them. There's by my count, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Gonna do some quick multiplication. 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's like 35 different suits that you can craft. And
oh my God.
Some very, very, memorable ones. They have Scarlet Spider, which is my favorite. That's the one with the cut-off blue hoodie and the completely red suit. There's the Stark Spider-Man from the more common, the more recent Tom Holland Spider-Man from Civil War. They also have the stealth suit, the Night Monkey suit, if you will, from the most recent Spider-Man movie. They have the Sam Raimi Spider-Man suit, the webbed suit from Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man.
Oh
They
God.
have the punk rock Spider-Man, which is
Yes!
one of my favorites.
Oh my God, Spider-Punk. We love that. Yeah, there's also the Bombastic Bagman, which was Spider-Man when he had to fill in for a member of the Fantastic Four, which includes a Fantastic Four style jumpsuit, the blue jumpsuit with the black gloves and the black boots
Oh
with the
my
giant
God.
4 on the chest, but it has just a paper bag on his head. And it's one of my favorite things. And you get that with the DLC, which is great. Because not only is the story really long and good, you also get a DLC, 3 of them actually. And they do put a good degree of playtime on. There's the Heist, which is all about Black Cat. The second one is Turf Wars, where you fight Hammerhead, who is a very famous Spider-Man villain. And then the last episode 3, which is Silver Lining, you get to team up with Silver Sable, who's another famous Spider-Man villain anti-hero, and it does feature prominently throughout the plot, Silver Sable. So it's really well done. I think that everybody, you feel free to jump in, but I think that it really reminds me personally of the Batman Arkham games, especially Arkham City, which was the third installment, as well as the final installment, which was Arkham Knight.
I didn't play any of those.
Yeah,
I
but
only played the part that had Harley Quinn in it, whichever one had Harley in it.
yes,
And you could play her story. That's like the only thing I've done.
I think that was I think that was either Arkham City or Arkham Origins. I can't quite remember, but that was a great DLC. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed playing as Harley Quinn as well. There was a Joker one in Arkham Asylum that you can play as the Joker, and there was some Robin levels in Arkham Knight, I think, as well as Arkham. I want to say City, excuse me. But the thing that really connects them is the stealth levels, which you have to sometimes. Obviously, Spider-Man and the Batman Arkham games are all about the fighting and all about the punchy, kicky, superhero-y nonsense. But sometimes there were levels where you have to be quiet. I was just playing one where Spider-Man he finds out that Mary Jane is in the museum that is currently being robbed, and he has to help her, and they've taken a hostage that isn't Mary Jane, and he has to make sure that he doesn't alert them, otherwise they'll kill the hostage. And there was a lot of similar levels of like that in Arkham City.
Yeah, I remember like 3 of them.
Yeah. So it's the similar ways that you could take out enemies, kind of like zipping your bat line to them and then knocking them out. You can also do that as Spider-Man. You kind of do like a web zip and then knock them out. Otherwise,
I hugged so many people from the rafters.
Yes, that's
the
the
best
other
one.
That's the other one you could do, which is is kind of the perch takedown, and you can kind of like wrap them up and like kind of leave them hanging for the cops to find later on. And obviously that's a little bit different for Batman, but it takes on a completely different tone with Spider-Man, because that's his whole thing is, like tying people up and, and leaving them with a note that says your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man on it. So I think those games really work similarly. They work in a similar way with like the open world aspect of both games. The collection aspect of some games, you get to do little things, completing tasks, doing side missions, stuff like that. So it took Insomniac apparently close to 4 years to make this game. It was chosen for obviously the appeal, and they used a previous travel kind of style from a game that they made a while back in 2014 called Sunset Overdrive.
Oh,
which I
love that.
Yeah, it was a good game. I played a little bit of it. It was fun.
It was.
Do you have any? You want to tell the folks about it a little bit, maybe?
It was fucking intense. Like, it was
great.
like, imagine, like, yeah, it was almost kind of like a Jet Set Radio kind of game, you
Absolutely.
know, where it was so colorful and it was so bright and everything was about just keeping the motion going. You got rewarded for combos. You got like power, like your attacks were stronger the more you strung along. And it was just like it was an incredibly intense game. I didn't play like too much into it, but I really enjoy the combat in that game. And you can feel that in Spider-Man 2018. And
Yeah, absolutely.
it's like they took, because Sunset Overdrive was its own IP, and it was like a little much for a lot of people, you know what I mean? Like,
Absolutely.
it was just like, oh my god, what do I even do? So it was great that they got that kind of experience into a game or into an IP that everybody knows, because everybody knows Spider-Man. You go in and you start playing Spider-Man, you just think this is another fucking Spider-Man game. And it's a perfect way for them to kind of flex their programming muscles, which they did in Sunset Overdrive, and get the love that they deserved from that game. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. I think that a lot of people didn't really latch on to it. A lot of people don't have. I mean, a game about a energy drink that causes a zombie apocalypse / monsters. I don't know. I can't even remember.
And then they went on to make a game about New York, so basically the same fucking thing.
Right.
Like,
Totally get you. Totally get you. You're not biased at all in this.
No. Not at all.
But yeah, so it is also very similar in having the different districts. You know, there was different districts in Gotham that you would have to deal with, and like one of the things that I'm actually doing currently right now is going around and getting rid of all of the radio towers. And if you have the radio towers, it opens new sections of your map. It allows you to kind of scan for things to do in the area. And like there's a certain amount of them in each district. Like I just opened one of 3 in Harlem, so I'm able to see where all the backpacks are and where all the landmarks are and where all the crimes are happening and all of Harry Osborn's research things that I don't do. Obviously, I did them at least once because I 100% completed this entire game. I did get
those are like my favorite part.
Yeah, it's like every single trophy. What did you like most about those?
Oh, I think I've said this before on a podcast. I'm a really big science nerd. So going to all of the little like research things that were throughout the city and just seeing like, oh, these are the things that we're trying to do for like pollution, and you need to collect this so you could, what did he do? He melted the plastic.
Oh yeah, to make the
So you didn't
gasoline.
have to, yeah, and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, I'm a really big fucking nerd, so I was just like, science? Hello? For me?
Right. And that probably works into your love of Spider-Man, is that he is a scientist at the end of the
He's
day.
a scientist, yeah. And like I said, I'm just a really big fucking nerd.
Yeah,
So I was
and
just like-
so is Spidey.
like the whole-
Spidey's just a big fucking
I
nerd.
love. It's true. Listen, I love like everything about this game. I think this game was really well done. But I just like that there are those little things where, like, you know, some of the other Spider-Man games didn't really touch on, like, oh, he's actually really smart and all of these things, and like he's a scientist. And then this one like was like, no, he's a scientist. We're gonna remind you.
We're gonna remind you all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, obviously, like I said, Mary Jane Watson is a character in her own right. There are certain levels that you have to complete with Mary Jane Watson playing as her, and kind of showing that she is not only just like, you know, in the Spider-Man comics, she's like a model and like isn't really involved in Peter's like crime fighting life. But in this particular universe, in this iteration, she's an investigative journalist, and she works for the Daily Bugle, the newspaper that Spider-Man is very well known for working at as a photographer, and that's how he was able to take pictures of Spider-Man, because he was Spider-Man. And so I think that it's really cool that they kind of gave her own story. I will say, however, I did not enjoy the Mary Jane Watson levels at all. They were all sneak. Sorry, go
I
on.
see that's the thing. I enjoyed them, except for I think the last one you have to do.
Oh, the really big plot important one?
The one where you're in what is it, the mayor's house or whatever.
Oh yeah, in Norman Osborn's
Yeah,
apartment.
you're in his. I fucking literally think I had to redo that level like 6 times.
Wow.
And I was just like, this is fine. This is fine. It's fine.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is like for these levels and like the stealth levels, like if you get caught, it's game over. Like and another character that you eventually have to do that with, who's probably going to be a little bit more familiar to audiences nowadays, is Miles Morales, who is also
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so Miles Morales, for those that aren't in the know, for those who aren't massive comic book geeks like myself, like Rain, like Colton, Miles Morales in recent years has become the new Spider-Man. He is one of the ones that Marvel is focusing on in their narrative. He is a kid from Brooklyn. I think he has a very famous uncle in the Spider-Man universe, which is Aaron Davis, otherwise known as the Prowler, who's a very famous Spider-Man villain who's real sneaky and really good at robbing people because he's so sneaky. He features very heavily in the Into the Spider-Verse movie that we mentioned earlier, which completely focuses on Miles Morales. So if you don't know, if you are just hearing the name Miles Morales and you want to know his full story, I would definitely recommend Into the Spider-Verse. That'll tell you everything you need to know. He is half black, half Latino Spider-Man, and he is obviously Spider-Man's biggest fan, as certain kids are like to do when they literally have a superhero in their backyard. I know I would be, swinging from my backyard and shit if there was a literal superhero in my town. I'd be like, I would like to be just like him, please. Yes, thank you. I gotta get bitten by a spider, put them all over me. I don't care. I will be bitten by 7 spiders. I don't care. So he kind of starts off the game as this like spider fanboy, and he has this famous cop dad who is also a cop in the Into the Spider-Verse movie, Jefferson Davis, which I think is really fucked up of the Marvel Universe to name him that, just from my historical perspective, because Jefferson Davis was the name of the president of the U.S. Confederacy, who was, historically not too pleased with black people. So, good job, Marvel. You literally had one job. But, I digress. So Jefferson Davis actually helps you out in this one level. He helps you kind of fight the bad guys. And as such, he gets rewarded by the city. Like, Norman Osborn kind of decides to give him a medal for his bravery and excellence and all that. But what actually ends up happening is, obviously spoilers. I feel like we should have maybe said that at the beginning, but if I haven't said it before, I'm saying it right now for very important plot reasons. I don't think anything too massive has been revealed just yet. But during the time where Jefferson Davis is supposed to be, giving this speech and, being rewarded, Mr. Negative attacks. And he attacks because he really, which is fair, he hates Norman Osborn because Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius, a while prior in the story, tried to do this like experiment. I can't remember what the real implications or intentions were behind this experiment, but it basically they used this young child by the name of Martin Lee, who eventually becomes Mr. Lee, who is actually a plot important for another reason. Do you want to tell the folks about Mr. Lee, Rain?
Honestly, if I could recall.
Okay, so I just feel like I'm talking too much. Like,
honestly, it's been a while since I've picked up the game.
All right, so I'm just gonna roll through. So Mr. Lee he works at this thing called the Feast Center, which your Aunt May, the lovely old lady that she is, she's working. It's basically a homeless shelter. So she's obviously a very sweet lady for working there. And this guy, Martin Lee, is actually a really good guy. And, he wants to help out the homeless and the poor. But it turns out that a while ago, this experiment happened to him at the hands of Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius. And it turned him into Mr. Negative. So he attacks this. Ceremony for Officer Davis, Miles's dad, and like a good dude, when the bomb goes off, Jefferson Davis tries to shield somebody that's close to him, and he ends up dying. So that was not obviously Martin Lee's intentions, but it happened anyway, and that is kind of Miles's Uncle Ben moment. You know, it's kind of the moment where he decides that he, that's kind of the route he wants to go. So you actually get to play as Miles as he interacts with Spider-Man and as he starts to learn things from Spider-Man. And later on in the story, he does get bitten by the specific, the spider in question.
The Spider TM.
Yes, the Spider Teen. And he eventually gains powers, just like Peter did. So a lot of the ending parts of the game is Peter being able to be in sort of a mentor role, quite like he is in the Into the Spider-Verse movie, but in a much more official way, I think. I think that this is, it's a really great narrative. It's a really great story. Its characterizations are really well done, and is one of the things that people really praise about it. I think that Peter is portrayed as, not only just this scientist superhero, this perfect, he can do anything. There are moments of extreme vulnerability. There are moments of doubt, and I think that that's probably, when it comes to superheroes, we obviously love them for their superpowers, but we also do enjoy, and I think when Stan Lee was originally creating Spider-Man, we really enjoy the fact that Spider-Man is human too, and that Spider-Man has similar problems. Like when Stan Lee and Jack Kirby were originally making Spider-Man, they wanted him to have like girl problems and like be behind on his rent and like all these things that kind of humanized him. And I think we get that a lot, even though that Spider-Man has been this kind of the guy, the superhero for 8 years at this point. There's a lot of falsehood in what it means to be a superhero, and it kind of is shown through this, and how he has to give up on a lot of his personal relationships in order to be Spider-Man. He has to maybe do some things that most people wouldn't in order to be Spider-Man. And one of my favorite scenes in the game is when Otto Octavius actually first discovers Peter working on the spider suit, and he is like, "Oh, of course," and Peter's like, no, not me," and he goes, "It's you," and he's like, and so he thinks he's been found out. And so he's like, "Why didn't you tell me?" He's like, "Well, I wanted to, but I feared if word got out, my family might be in danger." And he says, "Yeah, I bet if you, design his equipment, I bet people would be after you too." And he goes, "Yeah, of course." I mean,
I'm definitely only designing his equipment.
that is all I am after.
That is the thing. That's it.
Yeah. I think
You
that
found me.
I think that Yuri Lowenthal really killed the mix of humor, because this Spider-Man is very quippy, very funny, very traditionally Spider-Man in that regard, but he is also very, very serious at certain times. There are certain things that you have to see and experience as Spider-Man that kind of pull out that more serious side of him. One of my favorites is when his mask gets damaged in a fight with with Otto Octavius, with Dr. Octopus, and he says, he basically reveals that he knew the whole time, and he, goes through pretty much like he already goes through the 5 stages of grief of like knowing that somebody knows who he is. And it's pretty awesome to watch just within these 2 lines of "you knew?" and then "you knew," period. Like that shows you that he's not fucking around anymore. Like he knows that it's well within the possibility that his secret has been found out. So there's really no reason to pull any punches anymore.
Right.
You know, I really could just talk about this game for hours. I really could. I think that Insomniac really crushed it, knocked it out of the park. If you haven't played it yet, I really suggest you do. The side missions are a lot of fun. I think the only thing I haven't really been able to talk about is the travel system, the webbing. You know, the traveling New York City via your web blasters. It is. I mean, you could spread it on your toast. It's so buttery. It is amazing. It's really just very fluid. They give you certain things that you can do that allow for greater ease. Obviously, you can upgrade certain parts of your web slinging. But, you know, you have a general, like, I'm going to do it right now, you know, in order to explain it, but you press the X button to jump, you hit the right trigger, and now I'm in a big full swing. I hit the X button at the top of my jump, and that lets me get a little bit extra height. I can zip forward with the X button that allows me to maintain a little bit more flow and speed. But, you know, it is kind of if you watch the Into the Spider-Verse movie, you'll hear when he's teaching him how to web sling, he's like, all right, so, web release, web release. And it really is that way. It makes it feel very natural, even though you're doing something a superhero is doing.
And you know what I really do love about that? It is such an important part of the game because they really wanted to nail that mechanic down, because obviously it's Spider-Man's hallmark, but it's something that you're doing a majority of the game. And
oh, absolutely. Like,
they made it so visually pleasing, and they made it like every time the web hits something that you're swinging on, it's so satisfying, it's just so satisfying, literally clearing an entire city sector in 5 seconds because you just know how to web properly. And I've always wanted to do that. I have always, every time a Spider-Man movie is on or a Spider-Man cartoon's on, every time he's slinging web, I'm like, God damn it, I want to do that.
Do you think that would ease your commute through New York City? If you could?
Without a doubt.
Oh boy, wouldn't it?
I would just careen through my windows. But and again, like you just said, I work in New York City, and I see all these I walk through the streets of where these movies were shot, and I'm like, I want to fucking do that. So this game has brought that kind of feeling closer than we've ever gotten it. It just feels like they knew a lot of people look at that and go, I want to do that. So they're like, how are we going to make people feel like they are actually doing it?
Wow. Yeah, I hadn't even considered that. And I think that you're totally right. I think that it is extremely satisfying, and I think that one of you were right to say that it is Spider-Man's hallmark.
Yeah, and it's something you're doing a majority of the game, so it's just such a simple yet nuanced mechanic of the game. It was
one of the things I was worried about going into the game, because growing up, we had every Spider-Man game that came out. My brothers were really into Spider-Man. And, I just remember, if you remember the old, PlayStation 2 Spider-Man
yes,
game,
I do.
Oh my god.
The webbing was, I would, literally got the game, and I was sitting there, and I was like, what if the webbing's bad? And I'm like, they've had so long to perfect this, it can't be bad. And then, you got into it, and it was amazing. And, there's things that you have to do that are timed, and you have these side missions where it's you're chasing after a drone or a bomb, and if you don't have that good movement to get there, the game's not enjoyable. So I just really appreciated that we went from that shitty janked up webbing in PlayStation 2 version to this beautiful fluid motion in the new game, because I gotta be real, I probably would have given up playing the game if it was bad.
Now, I kind of this game seems very hip to its past, it seems very, very tribute-y, or it seems to pay homage to its past a lot, to all the past Spider-Man IPs. Wouldn't it be hilarious if they added like a DLC where they had the really shitty web mechanics for just like one mission, or like something
Right.
No.
happened, like Peter Parker's his suit got fucked up or something, and like
the web slingers are malfunctioning. You know, that's classic. I think there is one of the Harry Osborn missions where you can't swing. You have to completely be on the ground.
oh my
So-
god.
You have to like, do
Yeah,
it
so-
that way. It was really annoying.
So that would be
it
like
was like-
Spider-Man in the Midwest. Like,
Yeah, extremely annoying. Or like where we live, like
Yeah,
where we live, it's all very
suburbia.
suburban. So like he would have a lot of trouble. You know, it's only because
Can't
of all
relate.
these. It's only because of all these, big buildings and rooftops that he's able to do what he can do. So
But you know what? You know what they did do that I really, really enjoyed that they did? The suit that's from the comic books.
Yeah.
That they put in.
yes,
I really
classic suit.
appreciated that because it like looks so out of place
It does.
with all of the graphics being so nice, but then you have this. Oh, we just pulled this off the page and slapped that in.
I just snapped it to y'all.
I
yeah.
appreciated it. It was one of my favorite things.
I gotta say it, hang on. Oh my god. Yeah, it really does look out of place. But like at the same time, it doesn't look too out of place. It literally just looks like a fucking, like they just ripped that from the Javits Center. They just put some guy on the roof. Like it's, it looks plausible.
Do a flip.
It do a flip. It looks plausible, but it does look so out of place. But I kind of love that. They really showed love to Spidey. And
Trust me, man. There are many other suits in this game that are way more out of place than the classic
yeah,
suit.
are you kidding me? Like we were just talking about punk rock Spider-Man. Fucking
Yeah.
hell! If I saw that walking down the street, I'm crossing the street. That's
There's, I think it was Spider Pals. It's like literally a cartoon. It's absolutely like just a full chibi Spider-Man, and I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Like,
that's funny as hell.
so I figure like we've really chatted enough about the main game. I would really love to talk to you guys about the DLC, which is a lot of fun. Obviously, the first one called The Heist, you have to follow Black Cat, who's kind of very much like the Catwoman. Sorry to, obviously to pardon the similarities, but it's kind of like the Catwoman to Spider-Man's Batman. Like, she is a criminal, she's a thief, and she is in some sort of a romantic tension-y thing with Peter Parker / Spider-Man. She only knows him as Spider-Man, I think. So there is an actually very funny scene in the comics somewhere where they had already previously like boned, and she finds out that he's like 16, and she like throws up, like she's really disgusted with herself.
I mean, that's a mood.
So it's really great. Felicia Hardy is a great character. I think that this game did her very well. There was a lot of callbacks to her original origin story from the comics. So it was just dang fun to play, and fighting alongside Black Cat in certain points was really, really cool. And that's the first one. The second one, the Turf Wars, is really kind of like a gang war-y kind of scenario with this boss Hammerhead, who becomes the main villain of the next, not only this episode of the DLC, but the next one. And Hammerhead's whole thing is that part of his skull has been replaced by very, very strong steel.
Good.
Close.
I just want to replace it with a hammer.
Like, I would really enjoy, Rain, I'm completely with you. I would really enjoy if it was just a claw style hammer with
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
a pinstripe.
That's
Sorry.
what he should have been.
Just like
and
a
then they gave us this.
Like a dead ass DeWalt hammer in the side of his head, just like
with a pinstripe suit on, speaking with a Staten Island accent.
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
speaking of, we were talking earlier about Miles Morales being from Brooklyn,
Yes.
and isn't Peter Parker from Queens?
He is, in fact, yes.
So, how many iterations until we get our first Staten Island Spider-Man?
Honestly, not that long. I think I really can't think of a time in which SI will not be.
Do you think they're going to save it for last because it's Staten Island?
Maybe.
Yeah, probably.
I think they're going to give us the Bronx first, and then they're going to give us Midtown, and then Staten Island.
Yeah, I mean, it's really funny that you say so because there is actually a version of they're doing in the comics where all of the Spider-Men are kind of colliding, very much like Into the Spider-Verse, but it's just strictly like iterations of Peter Parker. Like, it's not like Spider-Gwen, it's not like Miles Morales, but there is the existence of, and I think this probably is the closest we'll get to a Staten Island Spider-Man. No. There is Spiders-Men, plural, and Spiders-Men is a group of, I believe, 800 sentient spiders in a spider suit that are all having a collective hallucination that they're Peter Parker. So
I mean,
that's Coney Island Spider-Man.
that's Grand Central Terminal Spider-Man.
Holy shit! Specifically, Track 19. Oh my fucking god!
Really great. And the final, the final DLC is called obviously Silver Lining, and you deal with Silver Sable, who, as I mentioned, is a big deal in the actual main campaign. And Hammerhead got really fucked up in your first fight with him, and now he has a robot body.
No hammer.
I really cannot be kidding. He just has a robot body. That's it.
So he's like Richard Nixon from that one episode of Futurama. Like,
absolutely.
I fuck with it. I love it.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, there's like a cop character that's been helping you this whole time, Yuri Watanabe, and you kind of get to see like a bit of a like a disconnect with their character, kind of very much their like the law won't work moment, and their kind of like push from being a police officer to being kind of like an anti-hero / lawful evil style character. And I think that that's really cool because, if you just play the main story, Yuri's just like a wisecracking, really really tired police officer who, tolerates Spider-Man to a degree that she can help him, or that he can help her, rather. But if you just played the main story and didn't play the DLC, you would have a completely separate view of Yuri as a character, because of this kind of like through line through all of the stories of the DLC. So I think that not only is the main game fantastic, I also highly recommend the DLC.
Yeah, I really want to play this game completely. You know what I mean? It seems so fucking cool, and it's just such a long game, and I know it's 2 years old at this point, but like people are still freaking out about it. And
because it was really well done, and there's like, it's not like it's just you play it and you're done. There's so much to do in the game that, like, I don't know, to me it has replayability and things like that, which
of course important. It's like, it was like the Arkham City games. We keep drawing that comparison. Those games were replayable long after you beat them. And actually, Zach, I wanted to bring up a question for you.
Please.
I think I might know the answer based on this podcast already, but a lot of people draw a comparison that Batman and Spider-Man are like their representatives of their type of superhero in DC and Marvel. Like, like Spider-Man is Spider-Man is Marvel's Batman. Do you agree with that at all?
I would say to a degree. Obviously, both of the characters are very different in a motivation status. But, let's think about the similarities before we think about the differences. Right. I think that's the main point of your question, and I think it's a great question. I really thank you for asking. Let's talk about initial motivation. What happens? Spider-Man, his Uncle Ben gets killed. What happens to Bruce Wayne? His parents get shot. In both of these instances, the hero recognizes that crime is something that can tear apart families, something that is not interested in playing by the rules, and something that is totally foreign to them in their current state. I mean, if you think about even the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, which was very, very, very literate to the comic book origin story. I mean, Peter Parker was just trying to make some money to get a nice fancy car so that he can ask out Mary Jane Watson or Gwen Stacy at that point. Who knows? You know, and he just decided to become a pro wrestler real fast, and he got screwed out of money by the promoter of the wrestling match, and then a robbery starts to happen of this said promoter. And he eventually decides that it's not his problem, and that very same robber is the one that kills his Uncle Ben, and kind of starts off this lost story of the superhero. And I think that that's also very similar to, not a lot of people know this, but Batman, the guy who killed Batman's parents, actually has a name in the DC universe. His name is Joe Chill. And Joe Chill was this
He's
like
not
no
chill at all.
Definitely
He should have chilled.
less of chill.
should've.
I mean, Batman's parents were filthy capitalists, so I mean, I don't really care that much. But like at the same time, you know, it's important to him, and that's what's important to me. But Joe Chill is this kind of no-name, just street tough, you know, just a criminal, nothing crazy about it. In the original, in the very famous Batman movie starring Jack Nicholson as the Joker, they actually change it to the Joker being the one who killed Batman's parents, but it really is this nameless criminal. And if we remember both the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man as well as Batman and his relationship to Joe Chill, Spider-Man goes and confronts this villain, this guy that took away this person that was very important to them. And in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, I think he actually just throws him out of a window or something. But basically both of them decide that it's not worth it to take revenge. And Batman, you know, confronts Joe Chill, the guy who killed his parents, and both of them decide that it's not worth it to kill. It's not worth it to take that manner of revenge. So I think if we're talking origin story, I think that that's a dead set comparison. I think that that's really true in their motivations. They don't kill. They only subdue and or restrain for the most part. But they do have no issues really giving somebody the five knuckle shuffle every now and again. So I think in fighting style, I mean, the difference is that Spider-Man does have superpowers. Like, he is super powered. He has superhuman strength. He has the superhuman agility that was gifted to him by the spider bite, and obviously the ability to summon the webs. You know, whether you subscribe to the Peter Parker can naturally produce webs or the Peter Parker uses the web slinger theory, it doesn't matter. Either way, it doesn't really detriment, in my opinion. But I think that the difference with Batman is that he had to train himself, and he had to physically just go to the gym, get ripped, go on a soul journey to Tibet and learn how to do kung fu and all various other fighting styles on his own. But the difference is that Bruce Wayne was able to do that because his parents left him a nest egg the size of East Manhattan, and he's a very, very rich dude, and he has a lot of opportunities that Spider-Man doesn't have, because he's a poor kid from Queens, and he's obviously very, very intelligent, so he's able to go to a very good school and obviously get a great science-y job. But the difference between Batman and Superman is a big difference, I think, is in the upbringing of the actual characters themselves.
Oh, of course. But I would liken Batman kind of more to a Tony Stark.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without a doubt.
I feel like they're the same type of hero. They're just no powers, built their suits, and had a similar past. I mean, Tony Stark's parents were killed.
Absolutely.
So, and Tony Stark again was left a nest egg bigger than Manhattan. So like it's just
The size of Manhattan.
literally. Like, so I feel like Batman is more likened to a Tony Stark, but I feel like the fighting style of Batman can be likened to a Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, well that's true. I mean, I think that it basically summons down to the fact that, Tony Stark isn't fighting with his fists. He's fighting with technology.
Of course.
So I almost agree even a little bit further with the with the Batman Spider-Man theory. Like I totally get that they're more similar, but I think that the characters do the same thing for their particular universes.
Yeah.
Like I think that Batman and Spider-Man, I think that they're very misunderstood in their intentions. I think that Batman is able to be the Dark Knight. He's able to be this kind of scary figure, but some people, fucking love Batman. They're like, yeah, obviously we should beat criminals to a pulp. That makes sense. But a lot of people fear Batman, and they don't really know what, where does he get all the money for this stuff? What is he capable of? Where do his loyalties lie? Sure. And that's comes with the added kind of aesthetic value of Batman being a very creepy, dark, presence. But Spider-Man is like a wisecracking, whipping guy. He's like very chill.
Neighborhood Spider-Man.
You're friendly. Absolutely. And I think that, even then, a lot of people, particularly J. Jonah Jameson, and his very funny, he called it, "You're really going to love this." J. Jonah Jameson is voiced by none other than Mr. Darren DePaul. Yes. So he destroys J. Jonah Jameson. He really does a really good version of him. And, a lot of people also fear Spider-Man and kind of trust J. Jonah Jameson in saying that he is a menace, in saying that he is, above the law and, things of this nature. But I think that they do it anyway because they know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like Bruce Wayne could do a lot more for Gotham by just like paying taxes on capital gains over $35,000. But
agreement with that.
He could probably just stop beating the mentally ill to a pulp with his bare hands. But that's fine. But I think both of the characters. I mean, Gotham is a pseudonym for New York City,
of course.
And so in a way, they're both kind of like the hometown hero, and like not so far as like Bruce Wayne and Batman, because he's not like he doesn't really associate himself with Gotham too hard, other than the fact of like really messing with their police force. Like, I mean, the Gotham police are fucking awful. Like it's just bad. So I think that it's Spider-Man gets a lot more play and a lot more love from the hood that Batman does, but Batman doesn't need it because he has Alfred and his cadre of adopted children that he forces into extremely dangerous situations to deal with. He has his piles of money. He has the several DC, villainesses that he's, involved with. He has this billionaire lifestyle that Peter Parker doesn't have. Peter Parker has to worry about his rent. Peter Parker has to worry about his aunt. Peter Parker has girl trouble. Batman's never had fucking girl trouble. The only girl trouble Batman's ever had is which one is trying to murder him. Yeah. So
that brings into the love for Spider-Man though. That it just makes him more relatable. You know what I mean? Right?
So what about it? Tell me more.
Relatable to Spider-Man?
Yeah, tell me more.
All right. I'm a poor boy from Queens, so why the fuck am I not Spider-Man? That's my relatable. I'm poor. I'm from Queens.
You missed the spider bite part.
I've had lots of spiders bite me in my life, so.
Oh my god!
Peter Parker gets superpowers, and all I get is a disease.
All I got is the stupid, bite mark. But no, that's just it. He he has to work a regular job. It doesn't have this like huge amount of money. He has to make his own suits. He has to do all of these things. That it's just like a lot more relatable. And people prefer a relatable hero. Like, I don't know, back when I was super into DC, I really did like Batman.
Right.
I really did. But Batman's just not relatable. Because nobody's gonna leave me a fucking mansion and a ability to make a bat cave.
Right. You know, nobody's just
And
going
an
to...
Alfred.
Nobody's going to hire a British butler for you just because you said so, you know?
I also,
That's what I'm saying.
I think it's just, now that you mention it, when you just brought up no one's going to build me a Batcave, it just made me realize how deeply insane the concept of Batman is. He hollowed out an entire sector of Manhattan, like under it, to build a Batcave. Like,
yeah, it's insane. I actually just saw a meme the other day where it was like a fake DC, like if DC Universe had BuzzFeed. Oh no, dude, it's so good. So they were talking about like, guess who was spotted leaving the Batcave last night? Are Bruce Wayne and Batman secretly dating? And he's like, please give me the timeline in which Batman has to pretend he is romantically involved with his alter ego in order to retain his identity.
That's what we need. We need that as a comic, like just as a one-issue comic.
It's a one-off.
You know, like just
it's so good.
Oh
it's
my
so
God.
Good. And like that is something that I feel like Peter Parker would have to get up to. Like there's a very famous run in the comic books where Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, there's not really a video game we can plug for him, but please go watch the Netflix series. It's very good. Matt Murdock, aka Daredevil, is a lawyer by day, and he wants to represent Daredevil in court. So he has Spider-Man dress up as Daredevil in order to represent himself, basically. And it just feels very similar to me. I feel like Spider-Man, there's a lot more room for humor than there is in Batman, and a lot of the humor in Batman comes from the like people reacting to Batman. You know, like it's never directly from Batman himself because he's like grimdark and awful, but like if Dick Grayson knows that he's doing stupid shit, he's gonna really give him the business on it. So I think that it's a lot of there's a lot of similarities, but there's definitely a lot of differences. But I will agree insofar as I think that they do very similar things for their particular
They fill the
universe.
same role,
Definitely.
So I think that's really fun. And this was great. Like this was like
I had a lot of fun. Thanks for letting me choose this episode, guys.
Absolutely.
Before we end off,
please.
I do have to say one thing about the Spider-Man.
Yes.
And one thing alone that they got wrong.
Tell me.
They really think the police show up that fast in New York City?
Absolutely not. No way.
Because I gotta be real, that's my one issue with this game. Is I'm literally playing it and I'm just like, how are the police already here?
I suppose
what are you
it's in a perfect
about?
world.
Do you think? I mean, can I'll give you something for that. Now, New York City isn't regularly plagued by, supervillains on it. Well, that we can see on a daily basis. If the police were like hyper aware,
the supervillains.
Oh no, I know you're talking about the police response time. But if I lived in a city where Kingpin and Hammerhead and Green Goblin and Vulture and Electro and Shocker were all fucking normal occurrences, I'm pretty sure the police force would be beefed up significantly.
Oh, really? You would say so? In this police state?
I'm pretty sure that they would be like...
As somebody who literally lives in the city, let me tell you, you're incorrect. You are so wrong about New York City.
I mean...
I know you work here, but I live here, and you were wrong. Because I'm telling you, they would not.
I mean, I
They
suppose
did
they
not
would
show
take
up.
the New York mentality where I'm pretty sure if I saw a fucking Shocker sitting on the subway and he like blew somebody up in next to me in the subway, I'd just be like, okay, my stop is next, right?
Right, yeah. No, I feel like you'd kind of be, like, inured to it. You know, you kind of would be used to it. Like, you know, there's a very... I hate to keep talking about Batman, but now you've got me thinking. Now I'm going to literally be drawing comparisons and differences to Batman and Spider-Man for the rest of my night. But there's a very great episode of the Batman animated series called Beware the Creeper, in which a villain known as the Creeper arrives. And he starts off by, like, needing a costume. And so he robs this, like, clothing store for his very famous feather boa that the character is very famous for having. So it's as he arrives, everybody runs out of the store, but the store clerk stays, and he's just like, she's like, would you like that? And he's like, yes, please. And it's like paper or plastic, and he just like slaps this like
the mask, yep.
Yeah, a mask down and says plastic. But like, that's the thing, is that girl behind the counter, that's a Gotham local right there. She has lived in this city her entire life. She has to be used to this shit by now.
I mean, yeah, I know what you mean. It's really amazing because, like, in the show like that, you can tell who the locals are. Like,
Absolutely.
it's just so fucking funny.
Fucking great. So, Rain, since you actually played it in so many words, in, 5 words or less, why should somebody play Spider-Man 2018?
Because I said so.
All right, that's all right.
Because you told me to.
Because you told me to. Absolutely. I would say no. Okay. Do you want to give us? Do you want to keep going?
In a bit of a longer answer, it was just really well done, and I think that everyone should take the chance to play it. I think there's something in it for everyone who isn't a big fucking nerd like us.
I agree. I completely agree. There's a lot of fun car chases and stuff that you partake in. There's
You
a
can
really
throw missiles at people.
you can throw missiles. The upgrades are a lot of fun. And I think that you're definitely right. I would recommend it strictly for its characterization, its comic book literacy, and just feeling. It just makes you feel super. I've not had a great week, so last night I was just feeling really bummed, and I just loaded it up once again. And it just made me feel like a superhero, As much as, like, Guitar Hero makes you feel like a musician, I feel like this game really makes you feel like Spider-Man.
Zach,
and I think...
You just talked for an hour and 15 minutes straight. You're a fucking superhero, all right?
Oh, man. Oh, yikes. Yikes, dude. The other thing I can say is that it comes in a variety of difficulties, as most of these games can do. There is the original, like the easiest level is they're all parts of the titles that Spider-Man has been before. So like one of the lower ones is like amazing, and like one of the, I think that's actually the high, I can't remember, but it's like amazing, fantastic, spectacular, and ultimate. Right. So it's all things that Spider-Man has been called before, and I mean, if you play it on the lowest difficulty, I mean, it's practically a story mode. It's practically like an interactive story.
A playable movie, like...
Yeah, and you don't have to do all the side missions, you don't have to do all of the things, you can just go through the storyline, and it'll be a great experience, but, honestly, I played the whole game, I 100%ed the entire game, and I'd like to really share the story about how I did and the last trophy that I got, because it's not like the information isn't given to you. And if you want to go and play the game, please stop it right here, because I think this is a very special moment that only you as the player should interact with. There is a graveyard that you can visit on the north side of Harlem, the district of Harlem in the game, and it contains the grave of Ben Parker, Spider-Man's Uncle Ben, who is obviously dead at the beginning of this game, as Spider-Man has been in action for 8 years. But, you can go and you can interact with it, and there's a trophy just for interacting with it, just for finding it and just for touching it and getting the little thing that he has to say. And that was the last trophy that I got. He just says, "Oh, hey, Uncle Ben, I miss you. I love you. You know, I hope I'm making you proud." And the last words that came up on my screen was the trophy. And the trophy is called "With Great Power," which is obviously part of Uncle Ben's famous quote that Peter kind of rests his whole Spider-Man identity on, which, if you guys would mind finishing it for me, with great power. Anyone?
I
Comes
thought
great
Colton was gonna do
responsibility.
every
Oh,
one.
sorry. I just.
God, guys, I'm just trying to do a little narrative here. But yes, with great power comes great responsibility,
And
I think
fantastic
that,
instant rice.
and that I think yes, Uncle Ben's does. God damn it! All right, we can end this. We can end this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone, for listening.
Thanks for coming. You're all
man.
heroes.
Let's give
You're
us
all
social
heroes to
media. Follow me, C-Train Media on Twitter.
Follow me at Zach That Whip on Twitter and at Instagram on ZForm Arts for my art. That's ZEE Form Arts.
You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Oh No It's Rain, and they both still probably say Felix because I'm not changing anytime soon.
That's fine.
No, you aren't.
Felix
and we don't
wouldn't
want you to.
All right, everyone, let's swing on out of here. That was
Try my best.
That was
I
great.
tried my best to do the web sound. Did it sound good?
That was great.
That sounded pretty good.
Nice.
Goodbye, everyone.
Oh God.
And if you want to follow us on Twitter, we are there at the Tryforce _. We also do Twitch streams at the Tryforce _. If you are the owner of the Tryforce, it has been 9 years. Please give that back
I think
to us.
it's 10 at this point. I want to take a look.
Oh my God, probably at this point 10. And we have an Instagram at the Tryforce. That's the only one we were able to snag.
Yeah, so we should stream this game sometime. That'd be fun.
Oh yeah, when the CDC says that we can see each other again.
Eventually.
Well, everyone, stay safe. I hope you guys are doing well, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Spider-Man, Spider-Man, I don't know how to end this podcast.